feel like, going back to, Joven Navegante, right? The song Joven Navegante is just kind of the idea of just exploring and being adventurous, just as like a person, right? Just, living life. So for me, I think, it's the same thing with music. There's no separation, it's like music is like a soundtrack to your daily life, right? To it's like the rhythm to your soundtrack, right? So as a musician trying to make music, it's like, okay, you're trying to make your own soundtrack. So yeah, it just constantly changes. It's super fluid, and I think as somebody who's trying to, for any musician who's trying to learn an instrument, who's trying to learn a style, you start to understand that all styles are very similar. All styles, like especially when you're looking at, stuff that we're into, like 60s and 70s music, 80s music, pop music, American music. Obviously, we're here in the United States, so we grow up with that, and obviously the hegemony of American music has transcended to the world, so it's influenced everybody else's music throughout the world. So, how is something produced in Saigon in 1972 different from something produced in Chicago at the same time? So it's interesting how, um, obviously, there's such a thing as a music industry, and everything's so complex now with social media that the commodification of music is extreme. Like the way you could divide and subdivide genres and styles is never ending. Um, but I think, but at the same time, there's no separation, because like music is just something that you hear and you listen to and you feel. It's spiritual. It transcends really any type of way of that you want to let anybody would like to define it. So while we use words to define what we want to do and describe, whatever type of sound we want to do when we talk to each other as musicians, at the end of the day, the way we put it out, the way it comes out of ourselves when you're laying a track down, or is it's funneled through your own filter, right? As a person, and whatever you're going through in life, whatever whatever you want to, whatever your mission is in life, all that stuff, it affects what you want to do. That's the way I would describe how I'm constantly evolving within music, and the music that I'm creating and or am a part of creating with whoever I'm working with. um yeah.
Appreciate that, Bardo. Um, our next question, considering that you released your Joven Navegante EP in 2012, and then the self-titled Chicano Batman in 2010. So you definitely have some mileage in music and as a musicians. Do you still consider yourself to be Jóvenes Navegantes? Why? Yes or no? What it might have changed?
Yeah, I think Joven Navegante, like I said, the concept of that is just traveling. I was at the time when I wrote the song, I came up with the idea of the song when I was at UCLA in like 2007-ish or something like that, 2006-ish. And I was just getting on a bus. I was just on a bus. And I just started drawing myself, like my head, just against the window pane, and then I just wrote Joven Navegante. Like it just kind of came to me. I was on the bus, I'm moving. You don't have to travel really. You don't really have to travel far to explore. You know, you could explore your own backyard. You could explore your own neighborhood. It's just really a state of mind, right? You could, there's so many things that we do in our daily life that we have to take care of, right? And oftentimes that takes us away from actually experiencing life itself, right? So it's, oh, and so when you're able to kind of like relax for a second and try to enjoy, you can call it what you want. You could call it enjoyment. You could call it, awakening to the present. It's almost kind of like a Buddhist type of thing where you're just, oh, this is where I'm at. Wow. We could live years in a particular place without actually, you know, looking or talking to the people around us, right? or really like observing what's happening in your community. You know, I was just driving down Whittier Boulevard the other day, just on my way home, and I'm like, wow, looking around at all the signs, you know, looking up at all the people, and just really taking it in. And I think that's what it's about for me. For at least for that particular track, Home Navegante, it is just taking it all in. Um, and so as long as I'm trying to have that type of insight where I'm trying to actually live and observe and I guess in many ways grow, right? Um, and continue being present in life. Uh, then I'll continue being a joven navegante. You know, no matter it doesn't really matter your age or how old you are. As they say, age is a state of mind.
I guess I wanted to ask, like, what does the word Chicano mean to you? And why did you choose to have that be a part of your name? And then lastly, what does the Chicano Batman, the aesthetic of the suit, what did it mean to you?
So for me, it's interesting how everything has changed over the last three decades. For me, as a I would say that I was radicalized. I'll use the word radicalized at a young age, probably like at the age of 16 or 17. I started reading The Black Beret, which is a book written by, it's just a book about Che Guevara. I wrote a book, another one called Rebellion from the Roots, uh, around like 1999, right? 2000, 2001. All, you know, it was very tumultuous time in American history. And as every time is, so, anyways, I just started reading books. That was kind of a way of awakening my consciousness, my way of, you know, I got woke at that age or whatever. And looking around, I grew up in La Mirada, California, which is a community which is it's obviously a mixture. There's a lot of Latinos, but there's, you know, a lot of, you know, white people and Asian people, and it's like a mixed, you know, it's a community that's very close to Orange County. It has you know, it's an all-American city. So it's not your traditional, it's not like Boyle Heights, for example. It's not like other communities. So I was looking for that. I was looking for I was always trying to, from a young age, I was trying to find who I was, you know. I was questioning, I was as a young student, even from the age of maybe 6 or 7, I was already like, well, what happened to the Indians when Columbus came, right? I was already kind of questioning the narrative, and uh, and I think I've been questioning that narrative ever since. So I think, and then the reason why I'm saying this is because it's a process, like of my self discovery as a person, trying to learn who I am within the social structure, within the geographic space that I'm in, which is, that's a lot to think about, right? You live in a house, you live in a city, you live in, you know, a state, you live in a country, and you know, the more you grow, the more you learn. It's like very dense. It's a very dense, complex history. So when I was about 16 or 17, um, there was a bunch of shows happening in you know, you know, the east northeast LA area. That was the time that Ozomatli was coming up, and all the east side scene, Quinto Sol. There's tons of different bands that were. There was a bunch of shows at Self Help Graphics, and I started going there. I found it. You know, this was the ascendance of the internet. You know, 2000. I was online and I found a few flyers, and my dad took me to these shows, and I it was amazing. I saw a bunch of people that looked like me, you know, with long hair and with trenzas, and I was like, wow, you know. And then you look at the shirts and you look at, you know, it's like a whole culture happening. It smells like copal in the air. There's doing danza over there, and uh, you know, it was very I would almost describe it as if like I like it was 1967, you know, like if you were like some kid traveling from Ohio to San Francisco and you see all these kids with flowers in their hair. But for me, I was like this kid, at the show Graphics off of Cesar Chavez, and there's just all these kids, brown kids with like trenzas, with copal, and it's just wow. First of all, I'm just like a young kid, right? 16. I've never really been to a show in my life, and it's just like, and it's cracking. so I'd say that type of experience is what really got me into all of that, to the whole, and it was very vibrant at that time. So I think the activism that was real, obviously activism was part of that whole community. There was a lot of marches going on. It was 2000, fast forward to like 2003, you have the war in Iraq. And so that mobilized a lot of youngsters. Like there was a lot of marches going on, and I connected with different groups who were involved at that time. I was very passionate. I remember reading that book, Black Beret, and I would just do push-ups. Like I'd be like, damn, Che Guevara was nuts, the way they took Cuba, right? The way it all went down, and you know the and I read about the EZLN, which was also something that a lot of people were interested at the time. A lot of youth were interested in, and it was just like, wow, these cats, these are oppressed peoples that have been oppressed for such a long time, and they're taking up arms, and they have a sovereign nation, and they're doing their thing. So it still moves me to this day, and it surprises me that I don't see it anywhere. Like you don't see a Che Guevara shirt anymore. You don't see a EZLN shirt anymore. And that's just, that's how everything changes. That's how culture changes. That's the political spectrum, etc. So, yeah, that was like around the time that Chicano, the term, came to my attention, and I embraced it. I embraced it. And yeah, so it means a lot of things to me. And I think for me, it's also continues to change. And we're talking about identity politics here, so identity is also very complex. I'm Mexican and Colombian, and my mom is from the coast of Colombia, so it's kind of like Puerto Rico, or like you know it's something more similar to Caribbean. It's Caribbean. Um, so that's also been another part of my identity, which has complicated this whole idea of Chicanismo, or in many ways, I like throughout my learning process, going to school, and I was in Mecha for a long time, and I at a certain point I felt like I didn't fit into the whatever the mold of Chicano was. So Chicano Batman actually, was kind of me watching all these films at UCLA. I took a film class, a film and TV class. It was actually called Film and Social Change, and I saw all these amazing films from the Philippines, from Brazil, particularly done around the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they were very interesting art films that how could I put it, like basically I saw people around the world making films for themselves and not fitting into the paradigm, not fitting into any paradigm, not fitting into any paradigm of like, okay, well, this is you know, this is not neither American, this is not neither Filipino, this is both. This is particular to this place and time, and that's okay, you know. So like accepting who you are, and it's, how could I put it, in its particularities, and having the particularities be the uniqueness, be the essence, because everybody in this world is different, everybody's experience is different, every culture is different, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. So it was kind of like, I'm not necessarily vibing with the way people are just kind of like commodifying themselves, or just throwing themselves into a particular genre or space, or just one identity. I have multiple identities. And so Chicano Batman actually was a way of like, well, and we were also having these discussions in the Mecha meetings, like, oh, well, what if I'm Salvadoran, I'm Salvi, like, does that make me Chicano? Does what if I'm from here or there? Chicano could be anybody from Latin America, or what is it? It's just all these questions are part of the conversation, and I feel that Chicano Batman has always, at least this idea of Chicano Batman was like to represent that aspect of it, like the contrary opinion, like the opinion that not everybody accepts, because that's always been my experience growing up, and that's always have I how I have felt within the different spaces that I've been. So I know that's a lot, but I hope that made sense.
Does. And I appreciate you not confining the identity and really speaking to not having to negotiate, and instead of giving an answer, calling to question. Let's question these things. Um, Definitely, Carlos. If you would like to add anything to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll answer the second half of the question about the uniforms that we wore that Frank asked. That was Eduardo Arenas, our bass player's idea, and the whole concept was to pay homage to a lot of the soul groups that we kind of reference or idolize as musicians. A lot of Black soul musicians, Latino soul musicians would wear like the ruffle tuxedo suit. That was what was fly, like in the 70s and 80s. Also, just bands like Parliament, Funkadelic, this whole idea of having some kind of like regalia when you go on stage, like you're putting on a show, like you're coming to see an event, experience an event. It's not just sonically, it's visually. And so that was part of the ethos of wearing the suits. Yes.
Appreciate that. In considering that your identity, I think it ties into the next song that we're posting on here. It's called "The Taker Story," and it definitely calls into question those bigger connections around the world and the world implications, right? As Bardo had mentioned, of representation in his experience of people from all around the world making films that people saw themselves in. How would you define consciousness?
I mean, it's like a expanding cell. Like it's just like, I once heard somebody tell me that anytime you have an idea, like your brain will expand. And once you have that thought in your head, it will never go away. Just for good or for bad. I'm just kidding. But yeah, literally like that's what happens, right? So I mean that's how I would describe consciousness. I have a lot to say about Taker's story, so but if you guys have no questions related to it, it's all good too.
I'd like to add just, awareness. At what point did I become, for me, aware of, social injustices in the world, or sympathetic to the oppressed and the state that of being for many humans on this earth. And that for me is consciousness, and how I can work to make the world a better place so that there's less suffering.
For me, the Taker story I want to add this in relation to, like, I feel like the Taker story is basically about this book that I read by Daniel Quinn. It's called it's called Ishmael. And it's a book that my friend let me borrow once, and I never gave it back because it was it was so good. But essentially it just kind of tied together all the education that I've ever, everything that I've ever learned. Um it just where do I start off with this? Like going back to how we identify, a state, or how, everything that we learn in school, or geography, etc. Like, how do we what am I trying to say? It just tied together everything that I had learned, and in a way where I just think the Taker story made me look at everything like society and politics, and took away all of the names and terms, and really put it into like a framework of an idea, like literally the reason why everything is the way it is because we all enacted it. Like we all had this thought in our head and we made it happen that way. And I'm talking historically, obviously. Whereas just like, okay, where we think that, like we all believe that humans are that the planet is here for humans, right? So if you have this idea that the planet was made for like for humanity, like we look at history like, okay, well, thousands and millions of years ago, there was, the planets and the stars. We all know the story. We have the Big Bang. And then after that, what happened after the Big Bang? Then you have, all these creatures that came from the murk and the mud. And then you have all these savages all around the planet. And then you have, oh, well, you have agriculture. And, we plant everything. And now we have society and civilization. And, that's end of the story, right? That's the story that is the taker story. That's the story that we're all taught from day one. And once you accept the premise that it could be false, that premise is a mythology, then it kind of puts everything into question because every culture and society, not every culture, but we're talking on this technological device. We're not in the middle of the forest living off of nature. So I'm a part of the system. You're part of the system. We're using the matrix right now to communicate, right? So we're definitely a part of this system and we're contributing to it. We go, we use the toilet, it just, we're part of the infrastructure. And where am I going with this? So we are, and so it doesn't matter what we talk about, whether it's social justice, whether it's empowerment, identity, and not to say that these are not important things, but it's just to say that we think in these frameworks. Like every time that we see each other, we categorize each other, we put each other in these boxes that at the end of it all come from this story. And that's a trip. It's such a trip that we're all socialized to believe and to walk and talk and live our lives in that way. And it's such a profound thing that it's even very hard to describe, or to yeah. Anyways, or at least, anyways, I'm going off here, but hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah, so continuing this conversation of, you're mentioning intersectionality of your identities and how that plays with lived experiences as well. I guess, do you see your music tied to any social justice movements or liberation movements, past or present?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky. That's basically what it comes down to. We're part of a generation where we don't have to drink from a separate, water fountain. We we're totally, I've never experienced that, and maybe if I had a different shade of skin, maybe I would, and it's interesting how everybody, like all of us, we all have our certain set of rules every time that we walk onto the street. Like literally, like depending on how long our hair is, depending on how, what our phenotype is, you know. I feel like for a long time I got stopped at what's it called, in the airport. Like I always got patted down. Like I always got checked, you know. When we'd be on tour, they would, like, the band would be like, "Yo, tell Bardo to get out the front. Like we got to put somebody more presentable in the driver's seat." When we're when we're crossing the border.
He was on a no-fly list.
You know what I'm saying? It's like everybody has their own thing. It's crazy. Um, it's difficult to put that into words, I guess, but definitely. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do what we do if it wasn't for all the social movements in the 60s and 70s. You know, but at the same
Um,
time, how can I put it? And I don't think this is nothing like it's not necessarily like something that we wanted to do. Like I think I think part of the name was, yeah, like there's a lack of representation within the music industry of you know, and I'm gonna say this a lot because at the end of the day, they're just terms that people put on you and that you have to, you basically take them on because everybody uses them. But quote unquote brown people, have to, like, there's not that big of a representation in the music industry, and that's something that was part of the whole thing, was like, okay, well, Chicano Batman could be this kind of weird character that's kind of like a alter ego, but it's also something real because that's what you deal with. That's what other people believe. so so it's almost like defying expectations of you, right? So they think you're gonna go up into the venue and wreck it. Like they think there's only gonna be three people that show up, and that you don't know anything. There's so much disrespect that we felt on the road from like soundmen in particular. you know, they just, I mean, and to be fair, like all musicians go through it. It's also like, just if you're not if you're not the biggest rock star, if you're not Katy Perry, and if you don't have $1 million behind you, or millions of dollars behind you, and you don't have a 50-person crew, like they're just gonna look at you like, oh well, we're just gonna, oh damn, I'm just doing my job, and I'm just gonna, there's like a lack of respect there. But it's interesting, the music industry, the history of music, the touring world. It's all something that is very real. Like their industries and people are in it, and there's been like practices that are continuously in motion. So so we've definitely just participated in that, whether we wanted to or not. Like, and what I mean is like relation to your question of like a social movement. Okay, you're coming out of is are you continuing a social movement? And basically, yes, by putting our faces on the map, basically by touring and going to Mississippi and going to, all these different places throughout the country. You know, uh, I think what I would say is the beauty of that is that, it's just people get to see other people spread positivity, and I don't want to put brown in front of it, it's just people and people. That's it. And that's all there's to it, because we met a lot of nice people in the South, in liquor stores and just like wherever it was, at truck stops. Yeah, we encountered the stairs, we encountered the police, pulling us over in Florida, hitting us up for, basically on like a drug stop, right? There's a lot of drugs in Florida, a lot of drug traffic. So they saw like a bunch of brown people in a van with the brown driver. They pulled us over, So I think I'm you can't separate the political reality from whatever reality you're living. It is what it is in this country, and it's very brutal in this country. We know that. Like it's nuts. I think I was thinking earlier that the United States is it's like such a complex reality, and it's only getting more complex, more than other countries, because you don't feel like this when you go to Mexico. You don't feel like this. I didn't feel like this in Brazil. I didn't feel like this in Peru, throughout my travels. And that's the beauty of traveling, is that you're able to feel the different vibes, in the different places, despite whatever, statistic you might read, or whatever, the State Department puts out. What I'm trying to say is, despite the quote unquote facts of the underdeveloped world, like the vibe is just better. The vibe is so thick in the United States, you know, because of all these, like the stacking of privilege, the stacking of ideologies, the stacking of, like the racial hierarchy is so real in this country. And yeah, I think for me, that's one of the important things. That's what I've tried to say in the last record, at least, like in terms of like Chicano Batman's music. I would say that, for me, the thing that I've been trying to push is just like, yo, let's try to get rid of this idea, right? going back to the Taker story, right? It's just we're all enacting this idea. You know, it's not necessarily that it's a fact. Like there's it's not a race is not a fact, right? And I think I saw that in like some of the statements that you guys like in the some things that you had written in relation to society and some stuff in the writer that you guys had. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that it's not a fact. Like we're all just living through other people's expectations and our own expectations, and it's just cycling out of control. It's crazy. So I feel like within invisible people, I was at least trying to say like, yo, let's try to start over. Let's try to erase, you know, my idea of you and your idea of me. So, you know, we could just see each other as people.
And that actually brings us into the next track I was going to talk about was Invisible People. Before I go into those questions, I did want to give this question out for Brother Alberto that had asked. He wants some homework. So he said, similar to Bardo, literature has been a motivator for me. The emotions and power that flow within after reading from Latin America are powerful. Could you share more literature or even music from radical Latin American history that gives you the feeling of empowerment? Currently building a program from the ground up similar to Mecha. So he would love to hear some literature or music that you believe empowered you or you consider radical.
So I just put up a bunch of books that I was kind of typing, you know, that I was just on yesterday. I just got into this rabbit hole of like what things I was reading when I was young, and kind of, you know, those things were just, it was just a smack in the face. Like when you learn about you know, I mean, look, when I was a kid, I was lucky enough to have Mr. Johnny in my life. He lived down the street from us. My mom was a good friend with his wife, so they kind of became my grandparents in a way, like surrogate grandparents, and we would go to their house for all occasions and stuff. And he happened to really be into literature, like really, like he worked for the LA Times in the 30s, you know. And so he recommended me the first book that I have up there. I'm sorry that I didn't put the author, but you could find it. The Broken Spheres, and it's basically an account. I think it was basically looking. I think it was a real account by a Spanish explorer, like a friar that witnessed all of like the devastation that the Spaniards wreaked on the Mexica people, well, the Aztecs. And I just remember looking at the pictures, like they're real drawings, like from that era, from, you know, the 1500s, and you're like, damn, you know, you're literally looking at like what had happened through photos, through pictures through drawings, and you're seeing these arms getting chopped off and like these babies getting like, you know, gutted, and you're like, wow, that's deep stuff. It kind of scars you for life, but and I think it's not the most optimistic thing, but that's real. Yeah, I don't know. That was a big I think it was a turning point in my life. I was like, wow, this is some crazy shit we got here, you know, in this world.
Aaron, so while we're on the topic of invisible people as well, while race is just a concept, it is a concept long steeped in our history and society. In your lives, how do you balance these two truths?
Say the question again. Was it related to race? I think you said race.
Yes. Oh, let me say it again. While race is just a concept, it is a concept long steeped in our history and society. In your lives, how do you balance these two truths?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I don't see like race is not a truth to me. You know, it's like literally a fabrication, and I think but it's real because other like it's real. It's a real energy, because an energy is created by living people, right? So we're all living. If we're living, then whatever ideas are in our head get manifested through our bodies, through our actions, through what we're doing. So you feel it when you're on the street. You feel it when you're whatever you're doing. You feel it with your own people. Quote unquote your own people, whatever that means. And it's just a lot of trauma. Like how do you? It's really not that old. It's not that old of an idea. It's only been like maybe a few thousand years that people been in existence on this earth for like millions of years. That's also something that we forget, or we are not definitely not taught that. It's not something that your teachers are highlighting to you. No, they're teaching you the Taker's story. They're teaching you, how the Europeans got here, you know, and what they did, and and so you constantly have this reaction towards that as somebody who's not European, right? Or we're European too, though. Like, a lot of us are, where we got European blood in us as well, of course. And so we react like, yeah, well, this and that, white people and blah blah blah. But it's just like that reaction is not solving anything, and it's actually not that I feel like the people that suffer the most in this country, obviously everybody's suffering, but white people are suffering too. Like, they got a lot of trauma like in their heads, and I think the majority of like these killers and stuff that are shooting people are white, and they're going through what that's not a good thing to do. Like, that's not something I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, they got this real bad psychosis, I mean, I feel like we all deal with pride and machismo and all that stuff. That stuff is real, but it's not good for you. It's not good for me. Even if I step up to you and just like, what fool? And I'm like that too. I'm very proud. My dad was a very proud man, and he comes from another line of proud men. And that doesn't help like our kids. That doesn't help our the people that we love. And you know, and I could say that that's something that I'm still working on. You know, so it's like all that stuff affects all of us all the time. It's not just white people. It's not just the State Department. It's like the beast is inside of our gut. You know, like we live in the belly of the beast, and it's up. We're saturated in it. Like, we live it. We're on our phones the whole time. Watch The Social Dilemma. That is crazy. How complex it is these days. And I'm not saying I have the solution, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect, and I'm not in that. I'm all up in that. But yeah, it's rough. It's super hard. How do I balance that? I try to exercise. I try to get out a lot. And I try to just enjoy. And that's I make music. Like, music has always been my catharsis for all this trauma. Really, it's all trauma, right? And music has like it is for a lot of people, right? Like, hip hop is for rappers and the black community, right? Or all kinds of communities. Music has been that for me, like writing songs. And you know around the time that I became politicized, I also wrote a lot. I just filled up pages with writing because there was like so many thoughts in my head that I didn't know what to do with. So that kind of, and it still is for me, that catharsis. Music is that, for sure.
Thank you, Bardo. I do want to be mindful of your time, and I want to thank you both for being in our space. We have one last question for you, but I do want to share this before I ask that question. We did want to have all four band members in this space, and I would like to ask both of you this question for Carlos and Bardo, who we have in the space. I actually was introduced to this band through Frank. One of my first days as a staff member on this campus, Frank was like, "Hey, you should check this album out." 2017, I remember. Because when the album came out, I started working in 2018, and he said, "Check this out." And full circle, brother Frank, now doing journalism at USC, finishing up his program this year. Shout out to you, bro. You know, it's full circle, and I appreciate you for introducing me to this wave of feelings and sounds, not just a band. There's so much more than that. But we asked that question about wrestling those two truths because Invisible People, you ask, race is a concept that's planted in our brain, but we still have to deal with the history, right? So I appreciate you sharing, not just as a musician, but as a man of color, how you move through the world that way. So thank you. This last question that I would love for both of you to consider is, keeping that previous question in mind, how do you envision us taking over? Right, there's that lyric in the track as well. How do you picture us taking over, unfolding? This has revolutionary connotations. Do you believe this could happen peacefully? Because those are definitely at odds. But your music is about positivity and love.
What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, I think it could be done peacefully. I think representation is so important. And I think in the last 10 years, being in this band, we've seen things change. We remember when we first played Coachella in 2015, and it was a big deal because there was a Latino American band on the bill. That was radical at the time, you know? And as we've seen festivals change and grow and be held accountable for not being inclusive, you're starting to see more people of color on these bills. You're starting to see more women of color on these bills. And it's important. And, you know, it's definitely something we haven't taken for granted, because we remember those older days when we were the only brown band, you know, on the bill, and what that felt like. There was sometimes, I think for the most part, people are receptive, and if you're playing music that's interesting, that'll transcend, you know, any kind of social or economic or racial divisions that might exist, you know, perceived or felt. And yeah, I think that's how we're taking over. You know, you're starting to see it in media. You're starting to see more Latinos on television and getting roles of substance, not the gangbanger, you know, or whatever have you. And so I think you have to be seen and heard for things to change and progress. And I think that's how we're doing our part, and how I interpret the lyric that Bar wrote, how we're taking over. You know, we're being listened to now. People are paying attention, and that's important, because you need to have all these perspectives to really have like a balanced and fulfilling life, I think.
You, Carlos. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Bardo, as we close?
I just think that it's great. Like, you know, like all these artists that are coming up, you know, Cuco, Divino Niño, Innerwave, you know, just they're just, the quality is amazing. You know, the quality is amazing, and I feel like that's what speaks, and that's what moves people. And like Carlos said, I totally agree with that statement. I would say that also is just kind of, it was a little ego driven, you know, like, yo, we're gonna take, because we worked on that record, we put so much energy into that record, so it was also on some hip hop vibes, like, yo, we'll be on tour, you'll catch us, hopefully.